All right, guys. So there's reportedly flare-ups happening in an already existing long-time beef. It's kind of like a Goku-Vegeta rivalry. And it's like I don't know who's Goku or who's Vegeta here. It's kind of a little bit more questionable. But what we have here is there's this long-time beef going on between John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro. They're both Pennsylvania politicians, Fetterman being the senator and then Shapiro being the governor. But basically they go back in Pennsylvania politics and they've been fighting for a long, long time. And we're going to go into that even more in depth. If you want to check that, also you can see my video I did about how Fetterman actually told Kamala Harris not to choose Shapiro. But what we have here is there appears to be some flare-ups. And so this is pretty interesting. So a political reporter you're actually going to hear here is actually going to ask Shapiro about his thoughts on Fetterman. Check this out.
You and Senator Fetterman, it seems like you don't click. What's that about?
No, we're good. I think folks have made too much of this. And listen, my team and John's team, Bob Casey's team, our entire congressional delegation, Republican, Democrat, we all work really well together. They're doing important work for Pennsylvania. I need them to be successful so we can be successful in Pennsylvania. They need me to be successful so they can do what they do at the federal level. And I'm grateful for their service. I'm grateful for John's service, Bob Casey's service, and we're going to continue to work well together.
Yeah, so he's completely like BSing out of his ass completely there, and you can see he's weaseling out. He definitely is like doing the Obama playbook thing where he's trying to sound like Obama, and then the other thing is you can tell he's weaseling out. The fact that he changes the subject from John Fetterman, like he asked you about clicking with Fetterman, and you had to bring in other people into the topic that had nothing, like completely non sequitur. Like the idea that there would be some connection, it would be sort of falsely asserting the idea that there would be like a connection between you being that person in the situation and him being there. The reason why he's asking you the question is because there's a reported beef. There's no reported beef between Josh Shapiro and Casey that's very, very well known. I don't know if there's some really small beef. But the fact that he's non sequitured that and just like squirted over to another area, it's just like, oh, it even shows there's even more going on. But he's very weaselly, and I think this is the thing that can come off. And so I interpret him personally as being very weaselly, as you can see here. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are in terms of like what's your interpretation of him here, like what's your vibe that you get from here. But I do feel like he has like that kind of weasel factor, I think. But here's a super hilarious video too. I was gonna do a YouTube Shorts video on this, but I don't really know how to do those. But here's something hilarious. So it says Senator John Fetterman watches as Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro takes the stage here in Philadelphia. I want to say this is the announcement day of Walls. I think it had to be, but let's see this. So you can see everyone's cheering, right? Everyone's cheering. And then dude, this is hilarious. This is hilarious. Look at this dude. People are all up on their feet. They're super excited. Like, yeah, like super, like you see like the guy behind him is like super happy and everything. He's laughing. I wonder if he knows he's looking at him and like, yo. And then just look at his stone cold face. He's just like pissed off. He's just mad. These dudes hate each other, man. These guys fudging hate each other, dude. This is hilarious. Look at this, man. So there's clearly beef, and then there's this new article that's talking about how basically there's this feud going on. And so it's saying a dispute between Senator John Fetterman and Governor Josh Shapiro spilled into the open during Kamala Harris's VP search. It could roil state and Democratic politics for years. It says John Fetterman was angry. The Democratic senator from Pennsylvania is readying to speak at a disaster response press conference in Bucks County on July 16, 2023, just hours after flooding in Upper Makefield that ultimately killed 7 people. Local officials spoke for a few minutes to offer initial update for the assembled press. Then, Governor Josh Shapiro provided information on what his administration was doing to respond to the emergency. After a few minutes, Shapiro tossed the microphone back to the local responders, not Fetterman. Moments later, the event wrapped without Fetterman ever speaking. Already deeply skeptical of Shapiro, Fetterman swore off appearing at events alongside the governor going forward, as 3 sources familiar with the incident told NBC News. Fetterman, quote, through 4 or 5 rounds of prep. Yeah, he's taking rounds, you know what I'm saying, of prep on the run for show for that, one source said, and Shapiro just sidestepped it completely. After that, John said, if there's an event where he's going to be there, I don't want to do it. A person familiar with the event said the idea Shapiro intentionally sidestepped Fetterman was, quote, inaccurate. Shapiro had a lot of people speaking for him, but this is a person familiar, which is different than like one of his spokespeople. But he had a lot of spokespeople speaking for him about a bunch of the controversies he had back during the VP search time. Quote, when it came to providing updates in the face of this emergency, local officials were leading the response and determined the run of the show. The episode highlighted what has become an increasingly volatile relationship between Pennsylvania's two most ambitious elected officials. It's a Democratic Party rivalry that is suddenly spilling out into full view and has the potential to shape state politics and maybe even the national political scenes for years to come. And it talks about how basically... It says, earlier this month, as Vice President Kamala Harris was wrapping up her search for a running mate and was considering Shapiro among her final choices, Politico reported that Fetterman aides told Harris's team the senator had concerns about Shapiro. Days later, Fetterman sat stone-faced with his arms crossed as Shapiro delivered a rousing speech at the Philadelphia rally where Harris introduced Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her number 2. Seated among a delegation of Pennsylvania politicians right in front of the press section, the 6'8", damn, he's 6'8"? Fetterman stood out as a lone member who did not join in the clapping and cheering for Shapiro. Holy smokes, he's 6'8"? Oh my God, should have been a basketball player. So this is the video that they're referencing in the article where he's just sitting stone faced. Like, dude, they hate each other, man. Oh my God. Quote, for most PA politicos, it's pretty well known that the two clashed, one Pennsylvania Democrat said. It was obvious that these two were always on the collision course, and the only thing that kept them apart was they were going for different types of offices. So they were basically rising in the ranks at the same time. You know, Fetterman was lieutenant governor at one point, and I think Shapiro was AG. So they were both on like parallel pathways to the top pretty much. And so then Fetterman ends up getting in as senator, Shapiro as governor. And it was huge because Fetterman coming out and saying this, I think what ended up happening with Shapiro as to why he wasn't chosen was because he was too ambitious, I think was the reason. I think Harris didn't want anyone who's going to usurp her. The reports are saying that Harris didn't choose Walz because of his perceived progressivism or anything like that. The reason was just they just vibe better together. And I think that it was basically she didn't feel like she was feeling threatened by him, like he wanted the slot. So in the interview and everything that the vibe she got, she kind of felt that pretty much he was just going to be the VP. He wasn't angling for president. But everybody's nicknaming Shapiro as, quote, ambitious. And reportedly in the interview, he was actually incessantly asking questions about the role of the vice president, like nonstop, which indicated to her, like, man, this guy's trying to, like, take my spot. She doesn't want that. She's pretty cutthroat herself in terms of power. She's a very, like, serious power broker behind the scenes, absolutely cutthroat. She was ready for when this thing happened for 2024. That was ready for 2028, but it got triggered early. So Kamala also went through the same thing too, where Biden was afraid of her and had shunned her away and just gave her the border, didn't really allow her to do anything. And so there was a lot of clashing going on between them during the early days of the presidency, right? You guys can go check out. I even did a report on that as well. So she didn't want to have that same situation happen again. It goes on and says, it almost feels like our dirty laundry is being let out to air, this person added. News conference incident last year is also not the first example of Fetterman withdrawing from events with other knowledge over a perceived slight. Early days of the pandemic, Fetterman, then Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor, participated in a daily staff call with top officials and then Governor Tom Wolf's administration. After days of raising criticism about how Wolf's staff was handling state-controlled liquor stores and flagging tweets suggesting the administration was falling short in its coronavirus response, Wolf told Fetterman to essentially chill out. Fetterman stopped appearing on the calls afterward. Ooh, so he's a petty bitch. Fetterman is a petty bitch. He's petty, I guess. He can't handle a lot of the criticism, I guess. NBC News spoke with 12 people familiar with the Fetterman-Shapiro relationship from different perspectives, most of whom were granted anonymity to speak candidly about a sensitive matter featuring two powerful figures. In Pennsylvania, no two elected officials have seen their fortunes improve or their national prominence grow more in the Donald Trump era. Talks about that. Like oil and water. For Fetterman, he ran a failed 2016 Senate bid as an acolyte of Senator Bernie Sanders. Talk about Shapiro's rise as more methodical, serving as a congressional staffer, state representative, county commissioner, and state attorney general before winning the governorship. So they kind of had like different kind of lanes too. I guess Shapiro had the more kind of sort of establishment lane or that kind of thing. I have a question for you guys, though. So in a battle between Fetterman and Shapiro, because Fetterman was a big progressive guy, but now he's kind of turned in the other direction. He's leaning more towards Republicans and a lot of stuff, and then he's also crazy on Israel. Josh Shapiro is also bad on Israel, but nowhere close, I think, to how bad Fetterman is. So personally, in the Fetterman-Josh Shapiro battle at this point, I think I would actually take Josh Shapiro. But this might actually be the hardest question ever posed to you in your life. Who would you choose, Fetterman or Shapiro? It's a pretty crazy question. But this article, if you want to read the rest of it, it's a really lengthy article here. Super lengthy article. Saying, at the Harris Walls rally in Philadelphia last week, Fetterman's visible displeasure with Shapiro during speech is noticeable to those seated near him. One person in his vicinity said Shapiro drew loud applause. He would, quote, pour my heart and soul into serving you every day as your governor, and would work, to, quote, to make sure we make Kamala Harris into one of the next leaders of the United States of America. Worried that Fetterman's unenthusiastic response would make it appear he was not stoked for Harris's campaign, which is not true. So there's just a bunch of this. You can read all this stuff. I won't read all of this stuff. It says multiple people said the feud appears to be much more about Fetterman training his ire at Shapiro than the other way around, particularly as the senator has taken public steps, like sitting while Shapiro spoke at the rally and talking about their dispute on the state pardons board. That was another big thing. They had a big dispute on the state pardons board over pardoning someone. And Fetterman said that, he's all about politics over people. That was his big example. So pretty crazy stuff going on here. Super fascinating, super hilarious. Let me know your thoughts on this down below. And definitely, you don't have a choice to say neither. Neither is not an option, so don't try to do a cop-out. Who do you got, Fetterman or Shapiro? You let me know.